anything written on it.
I don't have any chalk.
Welcome to Marriage Life Study.
Welcome.
Ken and Chris.
Zen.
Yeah. This is the Married Life Study for Celebration Church. So if you're tuning in, we're actually going over this book.
It's the 10 Commandments of Marriage by Ed Young. This is for Sunday, 7/23 of 2023.
And thank you, Debbie, for your amazing recommendation.
Hi, Debbie.
All right, so we're going to start with chapter 1, and basically it's all about being a selfish pig. It's really it. So we want to kind of talk about what it means to be a selfish pig. To start, we've went through this a number of times in marriage. What is God's perfect plan for a marriage? It really started with the first marriage in the beautiful garden on a beautiful day, a perfect wedding. So Adam and Eve obviously were the first marriage, and God created this as a framework for everything. Husband leaving his wife, or wait.
No.
Edit that one out.
No, we won't.
A husband leaving his family, wife leaving her family, coming together as one. Genesis, and it talks about, both walked in the garden, they were unashamed and not embarrassed. And then something happened. The wife. No, just kidding. Basically, they sinned. They gave in to temptation. Adam listened to Eve and ate.
Well, and Eve listened to the snake.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we're getting ready to go to.
Yeah. So,
because Eve was like, I'm not having this. I didn't do anything wrong.
Basically, that's where the first marital battle started. Don't think of that. But so when it all happened,
wait, how many times do we hear sermons about this? And it's like the different things that you look at, and the girls are always like, hey, he should have protected her and told her not to eat the fruit. And the men are like, why don't we talk about how she shouldn't have ever listened to that serpent in the first place?
Should have listened to him.
And I think that's...
Here's the big one. How was Eve walking away from Adam and just talking to some random snake? Anybody ever... Anyway, won't get into that. But, so something happened. And they both made their choices. And then God confronted Adam and about the sin. And this is where the first marital battle started, because men's response was not, I shouldn't have done it. That's bad me. No, what he did is he said, Eve made me do it. It's not my fault. It's hers.
But also, it's God's, because he said, you gave her to me.
Yep. So he blamed God. He blamed Eve, and then
the selfish pig.
Selfish pig that he
I'm
was.
So sorry. That was me.
But then Eve, when God turned to Eve to hear her side of the story, what did she do? Nothing better.
No.
So basically, their reactions is selfishness in action. It just.
I think women are really good to blame the circumstances rather than I never blame my husband for anything. But we also don't, ladies, we don't take responsibility a lot of the time either. We're like, well, I was tired, so I was cranky, or I was hungry, so I was hangry.
And men, I don't think we're any better, because if God would have went to Eve first and said what happened, I'm sure Adam would have been like, see, I told you, that's just what happened. She did it. It's not my fault. So anyway, selfish in action, it reveals two people not only giving into some temptation and sinning against God, but also against one another, and then trying to cover themselves up in an attempt to avoid accepting the blame and consequences. So the husband blamed the wife and God, and the wife blamed her circumstances. This may sound familiar to a lot of people. And that's where this whole concept of selfishness comes into play. And according to the book, this is the number one problem in marriage: selfishness.
Sorry, we were gonna say this at the beginning. If you guys want to get this so you can read along with us, because we're only giving or maybe you did say it and I was selfish and wasn't listening. So you can read along too.
I didn't tell you to get that was her. So
You can, but you don't have to. But we're giving you the highlights.
great job. Great job. See, we are not selfish in this, not at all. We're trying to give to each other as much as possible. So we all suffer from the sin of selfishness. That's what it is. It's a sin. Basically, one of the main commandments in marriage is this says, "Thou shalt not be a selfish pig." And this goes basically into what Paul talks about in Philippians 2:3. He says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than ourselves." It sounds easy. It's definitely not. But selfishness is where we get into this whole definition of being a selfish pig, pigitis, which I like how the book refers to this. Basically, pigitis is referencing little pigs in a pen. I'm not a pig farmer. I don't know what they're doing, but it just seems to be that little pigs are very selfish in what they're trying to get for food. They don't care about each other. They're muzzling each other out of the way. They're pushing and pushing and pushing.
Oh my goodness.
They're just selfish pigs.
So I spent my teenage years on a dairy farm, and if you've done that, you know you don't have a dairy farm and not have pigs, because when the milk is hot for one reason or another, you got to have something to do with the milk. So usually you raise pigs as well.
I didn't know you raised pigs.
Yeah, yeah, we had pigs.
Never knew you needed to have pigs if you had a dairy farm.
Steve knows.
Pigs and cows.
I think it was Steve. I can't remember. Somebody.
Some of you guys are gonna
one
know
of you.
that.
One of you told me about a dairy farm. Anyway, the point is, it was gross, and it wasn't like, okay, they're clean but they're not clean at the same time, because they can't sweat, so they have to roll around in mud to be able to block their skin.
So
And so they would fight for the spots of mud. They would fight for the milk, the slop. And the moms would even do that. Like they would eat up all of the stuff. They're like opposite of other animals in that instance.
we don't do that.
We're not animals though.
No. But one time we did get extremely selfish. We started rolling around in the mud. It was a disaster.
Babe,
Pushing each other. It was gnarly.
we're probably gonna edit that.
Anyway,
Oh yeah.
so what is the symptoms of pigitis? There's obvious symptoms. Symptoms of pigitis or selfishness can actually display themselves not only internally but externally. The first one is immaturity. How do you really define immaturity? This book goes into the difference between puppy love and mature love, but you can also say immature love compared to mature love. Immature love, they really focus on receiving. Mature love, they seek to give to the other person. But if you've been a part of our last classes, you've kind of understood that's what we've talked about, is being more focused on giving to the other person than receiving from the other person. Immature love is impatient, self-centered. Mature love is patient in spite of the other's flaws, which she does not have any flaws. Tends to outbursts of anger. I don't even know if that's right grammar. Just going to go with it. But they tend to have outbursts of anger. Mature love responds to and appropriately to irritants with gentleness. Immature love, they're self-protective because it insists on meeting its needs. So I'm selfish about my needs, I'm protective of my needs, whereas mature love, you're transparent and vulnerable when you have issues.
I think part of that is the maturity of communicating, because when you're immature, if you think about kids, like they don't talk a lot about their feelings and stuff. Whenever you get irritated, it's like a balloon, how it expands and stuff. And if you don't relieve some of the pressure when it's touched, that's an irritant. When it gets poked, it pops. So, like when you're mature, in your love, you talk about the things that are bothering you. You bring it to your spouse before it gets irritating to the point of outburst of anger.
Yeah,
That's my opinion.
No, and Paul talks about in Ephesians 5:15 having wisdom towards one another. So it basically, I like what the book says. Immature love is childish love. Children are very, just like we just said, they're very immature and they are focused totally on what they're going to get. If you still have that in a marriage, well, that's not good.
Well, and he says here, childish as opposed to childlike. We're supposed to be childlike in our faith, but not childish. So
in our love and relationships.
And it's the same in our relationships. You want to have fun with each other, so you got to be childlike sometimes, not boring. And that's not at all where this is going. I just liked it.
All right then. The second thing that you're going to find in this pigitis is time choices. The Apostle Paul tells us to redeem our time. Literally, we are to buy up all the opportunities time can bring us, basically. So it's easy to spend time on your careers, your hobbies, things that gratify you, but most of the time, those things can definitely come at the expense of your marriage. So marriages suffer when they become too busy. And I don't know, it seems like we can give examples. The best that either could hope for when you have a very self-gratifying marriage that's not focused on time choices is leftovers. We always have leftovers in our fridge. We never eat them, but leftovers can give you a meal, but it definitely creates a bland relationship. Leftovers are never as good as the original. Did I say that right?
You did, but I mean, when it comes to certain foods, I disagree. But with the relationship, you're correct. Oh, so let's go into some of those examples.
Yep.
Ladies, I'm talking to you. Some things that might be time stealers. Is that a good way to put that?
Mm-hmm.
Time stealers? Okay.
Ladies.
Not saying that you shouldn't do these, but if it's where you spend all of your time, laundry.
Mm.
No, just kidding.
Laundry.
Well, we need to do laundry, but anyway, going out with friends in an excessive amount. So if you're spending 5 days a week with your friends and 2 days at home, you'll like this one. Sleeping. I do that a lot. Naps. Excessive naps. Excessive nail primping time. I know that we hate it whenever our guys tell us, hey, we've got to leave in 5 minutes, and then we take an hour. That doesn't really show very much respect to his time, so I had to throw that one out there.
Time. I'm not even wearing a watch.
Phones. That's a huge one. Phones and Facebooks or Snapchats, whatever we do. I don't snap the chats, but TikTok.
You don't snap the chats?
What about guys? What do you guys deal with?
Guys, I think it's the same. Phones.
Oh, I missed one. I'm sorry. Cleaning the house.
Cleaning the house.
I'm kidding. Go ahead. Phones. You said phones.
Phones are a big time stealer. I think anything that really wastes your time. Like, guys, sometimes I think we have this, I don't know, this thought in our head that we deserve certain things. I deserve to go fishing. I deserve to play golf. I deserve to take time on my phone. I deserve to relax. I deserve to take naps. I think any time to where you're prioritizing other things over your spouse in terms of time. Here's the big one. Children. I know our children need their parents, and they need time. And we oftentimes have children, your children come up to you and say, I need more time with you. I want to spend time with you. but how easy is it sometimes to spend more time with your children than your spouse? Because we don't want to let down our children.
Well, I'm really guilty of too, like letting them, and I just did this to you, I just interrupted you, but having a conversation with you when they come out, and it might be an important conversation, but whenever they want to say something, even if it's just, can I have this piece of chocolate? I'm like, you totally, this kid has my attention, totally, and you might have been sharing something that really couldn't wait, but I just made you wait at that moment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's so hurtful. We're going to need a minute. Okay, the next thing, great examples, time choices. Okay, so we got immaturity, we got time choices. The next one is insensitivity. Insensitivity kills a marriage. It can destroy any kind of relationship. It's really hard to live with or work with somebody or associate with an insensitive person. We've all kind of been there.
Yeah, so like men, if your wife asks you, does this dress make me look fat? It's really insensitive to say no, but your fat makes you look fat. Don't do that. He would never say that to me. That
No.
would be really insensitive.
Be insensitive. I've never said that. Just think about it.
It was a good joke, though.
Yeah, insensitivity kills a marriage. It's hard to live with someone. No one wants to spend time with someone who doesn't listen or give consideration to the feelings or thoughts of others. So when you're insensitive, it actually shows up in your ability to listen. Fault. In Ephesians 5:17, Paul provides a model of what sensitivity looks like, and it says, "So then do not be foolish, but understanding of what the will of the Lord is." So there's a difference between foolish and understanding. Those are two contrasting words in this verse, and this verse tells us that foolishness follows a lack of understanding, basically. Understanding depends upon sensitivity, so if you want to understand each other better, then you need to be more sensitive to what your partner needs. So anyway, so insensitivity actually is one. Then the other one is stubbornness. It only seems fitting that one symptom of pigitis is stubbornness. Pig-headedness. Paul does cover this problem in Ephesians 5:22, where he writes that wives are to submit to their husbands as they would to the Lord. Now, some people, like the book says, take this to mean that while husbands are in charge, wives, you always submit to what your husband says. What he says matters. If there's any conflicts or disagreements,
he wins.
And they say, well, biblically, that's how it's supposed to be. That's not how it's supposed to be. So,
but it doesn't mean that the wives always win either.
Right. So you have to look at context. Context matters when you're reading the Bible and you're trying to interpret Scripture. And right before that, the apostle says that wives should submit to their husbands. He states that all Christians should submit to one another, motivated by their reverence for Christ. If you remember our past studies in married life, we've said this whole term of going vertical first before you can really work on your marriage. And that's really all this is saying, is we have to be motivated by our reverence first in Christ. We're to lay aside our stubbornness that characterizes our fallen natures and consider the needs of others. This is very difficult for us because, again, this kind of goes against who we are.
This, I think you said context, so I just want to throw this in because I learned this and I'm kind of excited about it. The antiquity of the New Testament, like what was happening in the culture those days. And I think the reason why it does mention wives so much in there and what women are supposed to do in church is because back in those times, they actually had their deities, plural, were goddesses, and so at a lot of the temples they would go in and they would be worshiping women.
Aphrodite.
Right. And so
I just guessed.
and some others, there are quite a few of them actually, but so women in the secular world would come into these temples after being Christians, and they were newly saved oftentimes, but they would still have that mindset of the culture that women are the goddesses. So whenever I think the way that I understand it is in a lot of this, it was just setting back to the way that it was in the beginning times, that we are helpers. What women, not that we should be completely ruled over, but there should be some submissiveness to that we are supposed to help to make us one in the relationship.
So smart.
Did I say that right?
You sounded very, very smart to me.
I sounded like I knew what I was
I'm gonna
talking
trust it.
about.
So
Someone will correct me if I was
if
wrong.
there is something, I'll be there to defend you. Okay, what says I love you to you? And that's really the question that you really need to ask yourselves. So when we talk about these things, we're talking about the fact that focusing on not being selfish, focusing on not having pigitis doesn't mean that you're never going to have disagreements or conflicts. They're going to arise.
But to not be pig-headedness means that you always ask the question,
Right.
what means I love you to you?
It does mean the ultimate peace reigns in the marriage because both the husband and wife consciously choose to put the other first in all decisions. And again, this goes back to what we've talked about. So anyway, so looking in the mirror, how do you diagnose it? Those are the classic things. So when you look at this, just going back, those are the symptoms of pigitis. That's, what you can actually see. And so the treatment of pigitis includes 3 things. Probably more than 3, but this book focuses on 3. So we're going to do it.
Pep. Pep yourself up for this.
So priorities, expectations, and patterns. Guess where PEP came from? Priorities,
Expectations.
and patterns. It's an acronym.
Is that how you say that?
That PEP.
An acrostic.
I'm going to call it an acronym.
What's an acronym?
Isn't it like,
Okay, Google.
oh, it is an acrostic.
Define the word acronym. An abbreviated form
of an initial letters of other words.
So that's the same thing.
It is the same thing.
I got acrostic from the book.
The book says it. All right. Anyway, so the treatment for pigitis includes 3 things. The first thing is prioritize each other. Get on the same page. This is the first ingredient to getting over it. You have to set your priorities together, not independently. You have to take time to write those down. Sometimes we talk a lot about, okay, this is what we need to do together, but how often do you actually spend time writing things down? It seems kind of archaic.
Oh, we're going to do it. Okay, so we're going to take 30 seconds right now and we're going to see if this actually matches up. I'm going to set my timer while you get me some paper because I'm...
Here's the paper.
Okay.
And here's what we're going to do. Again, instead of phones,
We're going to give you a
we're
timer.
going to use a pen. I know some of you haven't written in a long time, but
I know how to write.
we're still writing. I may even write in cursive. I'm going to go crazy.
Top 5?
Ready?
Is it 5?
Yep, 5.
And go. I feel kind of bad about this. Okay,
Number 1. Children.
I got God.
Okay, well, God is up there. I didn't know God was a part of this whole equation. Thought he was included.
He's
into
a
this.
part of every
Okay,
equation.
so he is a part of every equation, in my opinion. So,
Okay.
anyway, so after God, what do you got?
You.
I put children.
Okay, what do you got next?
Church.
I got kids.
Work.
Singing.
That's work.
That's work.
That's work. That's work. Finances.
family and friends.
and then marriage.
So here's an example of how we need to get on the same page with our priorities.
See what happens?
You do it too.
You do it too. All right, so right before the apostle says that wives should submit, this is what they have, is this whole thing about helping set priorities and coming together. And so really the reason that you're going to set priorities is to help you spend time enjoying each other. Rather than trying to figure out what the other person wants, your time together becomes more fun and effective.
Right, because like if you're, and they gave this demonstration in here, it was okay. So if a woman thinks that a man's priority is a clean house and she's a stay-at-home mom, she's going to spend all of her time cleaning the house.
Yes.
But his priority may be food. And so she could spend that time baking pies for him and get a lot better result.
Yeah, and if you are talking like prioritizing, like being on the same page, if your children, one person has children at the top of the list, the other one does not, then you can see how that can be a mismatch of priorities. Especially if you spend all your money on children.
Or if you have your marriage at number 5 when your wife's is at number 1.
I just wrote something down.
I'm
I was
kidding,
trying. This
You
is 30
too.
seconds.
I
Please,
love you.
please spend more than 30 seconds doing this. Please. Okay. Number 2, how to treat it, expectations. So we got the P, and now we're at the P-E. Sorry. So how do you set expectations? You build healthy marriages when you sit down with your spouse and define your needs and goals. So not only are you looking at what your priorities are, but you're also looking at what your goals are and how you define your needs. Very, very important. If you want to overcome pigitis, we're going to talk about this in more detail, obviously, during class, but you're likely going to focus more on your spouse if you understand what your spouse needs. Mm-hmm. And and if you don't understand what your spouse needs, and this is not in the book, but if you don't understand what your spouse needs or you never define these expectations, then more than likely what you're going to be doing throughout the marriage is self-gratifying. What you think you need, trying to place that need on your wife and or spouse, and that's just not going to help. So don't be selfish.
Or like this said, like, oh, they're getting ready to do with it. Never mind.
Yeah. Anyway. Talk through your expectations and goals. That's all we're doing. The next one is patterns. The final ingredient. We got through the P, the E, and now we're at the PEP. Patterns. I feel like I'm in Reading Rainbow.
That's a good song.
The final ingredient to pigitis treatment involves getting your lifestyle patterns together. When two people marry, I'm just going to read this verbatim. So when two people marry, they bring into the relationship different ways of dealing with life. Every home is unique. And we bring those unique lifestyle patterns with us to the altar. Some of those patterns may need to be broken while others embrace. So you're going to have differences in perhaps the way that your family showed affection, the way that you were disciplined compared to your spouse. It doesn't mean that those things are wrong or that anything's broken, but you just need to understand what needs to be embraced and then what needs to be released.
Well, and there's a lot of that you also learn through culture, through like watching TV shows or, you know, what did you grow up watching or what are you...
Honestly, if you grow up on a cattle farm with pigs, completely different than where I grew up. So
I did notice that finances did not even make my list.
Well.
I mean, you don't need that, I guess, whenever you can just chop up pig.
Chop a pig up and eat a
bacon's really
cow.
Good.
Drink some milk. All right, so take time with your mate to get your lifestyle patterns together. These are quick questions. How will you make decisions? How will you resolve conflict? How will you handle money? How will you discipline your children? Things like that. Get your patterns together. So those are the things that can really help fix it. So how do you know when you're on the road to recovery from pigitis? what is the cure? So you've kind of looked at your symptoms, you understand it, you're like, man, I'm dealing with pigitis. Now you've looked at ways that you can kind of help overcome pigitis with the PEP acronym, but how do you really know that you're on the road to recovery?
You love.
You love. That's it. And
You don't see this. I'm patting his knee. You
Love is the answer. So there's a couple of things we need to understand about this word, and we've used this word love. It's something that's kind of gets thrown around a lot now. Like, I love you. I love our kids. You know, we love each other.
I love potato chips.
I love,
I
you
love
know,
lamb.
I love pancakes.
I threw out a movie.
I saw that.
Did you hear the movie?
Lamp.
Yeah, I love lamb.
Lamp.
Some of you will get that.
So let's consider
Probably shouldn't.
what we could call the different types of love. So when we talk about love, there's 3 types of love that you should be experiencing in your marriage. The first one is feelings love, then it's friendship love, and then forever love. So what is feelings love?
Eros.
The Greek term for this type of love is euros.
Euros.
Like the sandwich. Euros. Or is that gyros?
That's gyros.
Gyros?
Euro.
I love those things.
I think it's arrow. I don't know
Anyway,
because I never took a class
somebody
on
will
it.
log in and correct us.
Tell us.
This term refers to feelings love, like we talked about, but this is the kind of erotic love that gets top billing in romance novels. So anytime you hear about or see love in movies or novels, it's basically this whole erotic feeling. It's this chemistry that 2 people have, a husband and a wife. It's exciting, it's passionate, it's physically attractive.
It's not bad.
It's not bad at all.
Usually that's how it starts.
Right. Some call it
Love at first sight.
love at first sight,
You're so
affection,
handsome.
sexuality. Thank you. You know so about yourself. When people say the romance oftentimes has lost its spark, the problem is they don't feel the feelings of love. They've
Or
lost
they
that.
smell the bad breath the next morning.
Yeah, bad breath.
That's me. Sorry.
I mean, there's always going to be things that could potentially impact your feelings of love, but it doesn't mean that the torches can't be relit. So you can always relight torches. And we're going to go over some ways on how to do this, like give attention and activate your will, be intentional about love, and stay on track with scripture and love your mate. So there's some things that we're going to go over, but more than one marriage has failed because a couple neglected to move beyond feelings love. So if everything revolves around feelings love, and you see this in teenagers and all kinds of stuff, they're like, oh, I'm so attracted to this person. I love this person.
You know, well, what happens when another person that you like the
Right.
attraction to more walks by?
Then it becomes fun. It becomes enjoyable. And suddenly they're like, well, I thought I loved him, but I didn't. Well, they had feelings love, but it never developed into the next phase of love, which is friendship love.
Filio.
Filio.
Filia.
So, which is hence where Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, gets its name.
Is it really? Does it
Yes, it
say
is.
that? Oh, it does say that.
Now you know something? Philia refers to an affection and bonding between 2 individuals, whereas Eros love is for feelings, results in a person falling madly and deeply in love, as if there's this irresistible thing. Like I can be irresistibly attracted to her and just anyway. Philia, though, carries this idea of choice. So if I'm just Eros, these feelings of love, I don't have any control over those, right? But Philia love, it's a love of choice. It's an act of will. And that's kind of what carries us through. So the best marriages in the world are those in which the partners not only fall in love, but also choose another as the best friend. And I think we've talked about this too. Physical attraction frequently gets the attention of a man and a woman for one another, but couples who count each other best friends consciously choose such a relationship. So we'll go over this, but basically, how are you creating friendship love for each other? Is it a choice? And are you married to your best friend? And if you're not, what are you doing to ensure that that happens?
This is where I see a lot of newlyweds who are starting to hit off that newlywed cycle, because
Right.
it's a cycle. We've talked about that before. And when they're not in that phase and they hit this like, well, what now?
Right.
Because they don't oftentimes haven't spent that time to get to know. So spend time in each other's hobbies. Just as a practical tip. I mean, I at one point tried to play video games. It was embarrassing, and I don't do it anymore. But it was fun for that moment whenever we tried to do that together.
Working out. If your spouse likes to work out, if your spouse likes to I don't know, cook or crochet.
Horseback riding.
Maybe they just like horseback riding. Anyway, whatever you can do to really kind of build that friendship love. The last love, and what I kind of feel is the most important, is forever love. Feelings and friendship love are both based, at least to some degree, on mutual enjoyment, satisfaction, fulfillment. So there could be some selfishness associated with those loves because it is a choice that you're making to get something. But forever love cares so much for another that he or she gives with no expectation of return. And I think that's where, in its purest form, forever love is demonstrated more by God. He poured out this unconditional love in sending his son, Jesus Christ. We didn't deserve it. But that's really what forever love is this demonstration of love. And the Greek word for it is agape. I know I said that right because I've heard it a lot.
Yeah. I don't know personally. I don't agree that we could reach that. But I know that it's something we're supposed to strive to have. But that is the love that God has that's unconditional. And as much as I do love you I will love you forever in my lifetime. Like, unconditional is hard.
It is very hard. And I think you have to work at it. But there's some things that we can do. So in marriage, this type of love endures the ups and downs and feelings of love and the highs and lows of friendship, because you aren't always going to look at your spouse and be like, you're my best friend.
There's sometimes you're going to look at him and say, I don't like you today. Don't like you.
And there's other times where you're going to look at your spouse honestly and you're going to be like, I am just not, what is that word? Euros to you.
You're not attracted to
I'm not attracted to you. And I think that's okay. Right? I think if you're living in reality, you're going to experience those two feelings. But agape love takes it to the next level through those ups and downs, through those feelings where the highs and lows in friendship love may impact you. And it's based upon an enduring commitment. And I think we've talked about this. This is a commitment. Eros, I like what it says here. Eros love is a matter of the body. Philia has to do with the soul, but agape is an issue of the spirit. And no matter what happens at the other levels, agape love sustains the marriage and gives it depth and vitality. And agape love is basically outlined in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. Look it up. But you can talk about, most of you have probably heard these. Love is patient, kind, not jealous, not boastful and arrogant, does not behave inappropriately.
Does not seek its own interests primarily.
Does not hold grudges.
Does not rejoice in wrong, but in truth.
Carries all burdens.
Not cynical and distrusting.
Hopes in all situations.
Endures everything that comes against it.
So that's really the definition. Feelings love makes marriage exciting, right? Friendship love brings fun and interest. Horseback riding, stuff like that. But these loves wax and wane, surge and retreat. Agape love remains constant and makes the marriage secure, regardless. And so, and we've talked about this in other classes. Only God can give us this kind of love. We experience this love with each other because we also experience this love from God. So, those things are really how you know you're kind of on the right track. Marriage isn't always easy. But it's always worth the effort.
Billy Graham.
Oh, good guy.
I know we weren't going to do this, but I wanted to because Billy and Ruth Graham. Oprah Winfrey asked Billy Graham about his marriage, and she said, "What's the secret to your wonderful marriage?" And Billy Graham said, "We are happily incompatible." I liked that.
Yeah, and so basically, they learn to overcome their selfishness and consider each other as more important. And again, that's the first marriage commandment in action. You know, it really creates the foundation for a happy and successful marriage. And so when a man and a woman learn how to put aside their own selfishness and give one another top priority, then their marriage can fill up with passion, satisfaction, and power. And so we're going to go over 4 questions. Not right now, but if you listen to this, these are the 4 questions we're going to go over in class.
On Sunday at 5 o'clock.
5 to 7.
In the coffee shop.
Coffee shop.
In the coffee shop at the church.
Number 1, in what specific areas of your relationship will your spouse or loved one, with your spouse or loved one, do you find yourself behaving or acting or thinking selfishly?
Well, just spouse here because we're married.
So in what specific areas of your relationship with your spouse do you find yourself behaving or thinking selfishly? Number 2.
What specific symptoms of pigitis can you identify in yourself?
Right. Number 3. What kinds of expectations do you have for your marriage and spouse, and how can you begin communicating those expectations to him or her?
And number 4. Take the love test of 1 Corinthians 13 and ask yourself, are you patient, kind, boastful, all those,
etc.
to your spouse? Not are they to you, but are you to them? And in what areas do you need to improve?
So, thank you. That is chapter 1. And again, we will go over it more during our class.
At 5 o'clock in the
At
coffee
5 to
shop
7.
at Celebration Church in Joplin, Missouri. Bye-bye!
Bye-bye.